Hello and welcome back to my channel, Bookish Lady Night, where we get a look behind the book. Today, I am joined by a new to me author, Holly Rose. She is an indie romance author and currently has 3 books out. The first one being Until the Stars Fall, which is a paranormal sci-fi romance. Follow Your Bliss, which is a rom-com, and The Night of the Trove, and that's a romantasy, and I am very excited to read that one. I like all of them, but I love romantasy. That's my favorite. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
So I read that you have some upcoming releases. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
So I actually have book 2 of the Night of the Trove series. It's actually The Knights of Melora is the name of the series. And the second book is called The Prince of the Outsiders. So that one is coming out August 18th of this year.
Oh, that's exciting. So can you give us kind of like I know authors don't like this term, but like the elevator pitch or like a little bit of a teaser of each of the books?
Sure. So I actually brought with me, I'm at the library because I don't have an office. But I brought each of my books to hold up. The Night of the Trove is the first book in the series. It's an interconnected series. So because they're romances, we're going to focus on a different couple for each book. So the first book is about a woman, Nesrine, who is the Knight of a Dragon's Trove. And she goes on an old school kind of quest with a bookish monk who's a cinnamon roll, very sweet, forbidden love, all that, to discover this magical artifact that her evil emperor uncle is looking for to make his army unstoppable. So that's book 1. In book 2, I actually, the characters will be familiar as you move through the books because I'm going to introduce them, or at least one of them, for the next book and the previous book. So Prince Forth is a character who appears in this book. And actually in this first book, it's a bit of a damsel in distress reversed because Nesrine is the Knight of a Dragon's Trove and she does not want to leave. But there are lots of men, some of them sent by her evil emperor uncle, who come to take her away from the trove. And, you know, the typical damsel being held by a dragon, they come to free her. And it's turned on its head a bit because she does not want to leave. And so she physically fights them off with swords and whatever weaponry she wants to make them go away. So
I love that.
Really fun. One of those princes is Prince Forth, and he doesn't come on behalf of her uncle. He's not a bad guy. He just, is not informed that she is very happy where she is and she would like to be left alone. So he comes along thinking that he's going to rescue her from this dragon. And she pretty much kicks his butt and sends him on his way. But she learns from him that some things that are going on in the world that she didn't know about because she's been kind of, sequestered away a bit. She's not wanted anything to do with the outside world. But Prince Forth shows up later in the book, and I won't give that part away. But, the fact is that he's a good guy. So he's the main male character of book 2, The Prince of the Outsiders. And the quick pitch for that is that he's being plagued by these nightmares of the murder of this king somewhere far in the north. And he doesn't know who this king is. He doesn't know why he's having nightmares about him, but he's seeing the murder through the eyes of the murderer. And it's a wolfish kind of the claws on his hands and just doesn't understand, why am I seeing through this person? I'm not trying to kill anybody. I've not killed anybody. Why do I keep seeing this thing happen over and over again? And so he decides to go to this northern kingdom to go see what's going on. And when he gets there, he finds Queen Sorsha, who is the new queen of that realm because her brother is the one who was murdered. And he discovers that there is a monster basically on the loose that they have to deal with. And there's going to be series because there are these iron caskets, these little metal boxes that ages ago monsters were trapped in because they couldn't be defeated. And so that's what's continuing the series together, is kind of the overarching story of those 4 caskets and the 4 evils that come out of it. But yeah, so the second book is going to be some forbidden love because, Queen of one realm should not fall in love with a crown prince from another realm. That shouldn't happen. There are annoyances to lovers because she does not trust him. Why are you coming halfway across the world to help people you don't know? She's never met a man without an ulterior motive, so she's very untrusting. And it just kind of goes from there. They gotta save the world.
I love that. That sounds so good. I'm excited to read them. So what inspired you to write in this genre?
I've been a huge fantasy fan just forever. I grew up on Doctor Who and fairy tales and all that kind of stuff when I was little. And then, especially in high school, I had a friend who lent me his entire Dragonlance series of books, just one after another. When I would finish, I'd come back, okay, I'm ready for the next one. And he it kind of reawakened, a childhood love of fairy tales and dragons and things like that. But I've always that's always what I planned to write in. That was the genre, was fantasy.
Yeah.
And then this particular book, The Night of the Trove, the first one, I wrote it. It was the second book I've actually ever written. It took me a really long time from knowing I wanted to be an author to actually finishing books and trying to actually become an author. And at the time I was querying my first book, which we will not talk about because it's a first book and those are never great. But I saw an editor who posted like a manuscript wish list kind of thing on Twitter. And she said she's looking, one thing she would love to see is a quest where a lady knight quests with a bookish prince for a magical artifact. And just that one little snippet made me think, oh, that does sound like fun. And so I just, one day sat down to try and figure this out. And, being my second book, I was still trying to figure out, how do I write books? Like, what do I do? How do I start this? And Nazreen, the main character in Night of the Trove, and her dragon guardian, Addie Dorstia, or Addie for short, they just kind of popped into my head like fully formed people in this one afternoon. And I wrote the beginning of the story, and that was kind of it. And actually, the beginning of that book has largely stayed the same from the very first draft until the published form. It went through so many revisions. I mean, I wrote it in 2019 and didn't publish it until 2025. No, four, sorry. So it went through so many just different revisions. But that one part really for sure stayed the same throughout because they just showed up and decided how they wanted me to tell their story.
What is something unique or quirky about you or a hobby that you have that maybe we don't know about?
Let's see. So I don't really have a whole lot of time for hobbies. I also work full time in addition to my book stuff. And I have two teenagers. So that's most of my life. Some of the hobbies I would love to get back into, one thing is woodworking, which is maybe kind of an odd one for a writer. But a few years ago, it's something I've always been interested in. My uncle actually did a whole lot of woodworking, lots of cabinets and desks and stuff like that. He's so talented. He can make almost anything. And it was just something I always wanted to do. And I found a friend who was interested in going to a woodworking class locally. And she and I went, and it was so much fun. So I decided, you know what? I really need a dining room table, but I can't find one that I like that I can also afford because those things are really expensive. And so I decided so I actually made my own dining room table all by myself. I didn't want any help.
Cool.
I followed a channel for the design and everything like that because I don't know much about structure, but I learned from that and I put it together and I still love it. It's a nice counter height. So I can walk up to it. It was great when the kids would be sitting there doing homework. The best table I've ever built. It's the only table, but it's also pretty cool.
That's a great thing. That's awesome.
I would love to do
I love that.
to do it, and I don't have the saws that I need. I had to cut all the wood for that at my parents' house and bring it home because I don't have the right miter saw. But one day I will have room for that.
That's such an accomplishment.
And my grandparents had like a scrapbook wood box. And so my sister and I would pull out little pieces of wood and try to make Barbie doll boats and like all kinds of stuff like that. So it was just kind of always in me to want to try it. It was fun.
Yeah, that's really cool. Within your writing, what is hard for you to write? Was there a certain type of scenes? Is it the emotional, the war scenes? Like what's difficult for you to write?
I think it really depends on my vision for the scene, how well I've got it figured out, I guess. It seems to be the defining factor of what makes it hard or not. I'm a big believer in that it takes a while for your brain to kind of process things in the background. And your best ideas aren't necessarily your first ones. And so I think the ones that I struggle the most with are not necessarily a certain type of scene. The fight scenes are kind of fun to write. The emotional scenes are fun to write, but hard if you're not in the right headspace for them. But I find the ones that I haven't thought about enough, that I haven't given myself time to, daydream about it, kind of verbally like talk it through with myself. I'm a big voice memo in the car person to try and there's a word for that and it's just left my brain completely. But I need to talk out loud to myself and I need the voice memo to keep me honest and like on track. But those are the hardest ones. If I haven't really thought through it enough, I've been known to write a whole chapter that is a sentence that says they go to the library and they find clues. I didn't know what was going to happen. And so I had to leave it for now.
It's not dictation. It's like an auditory, like you have to listen back to it. It's like auditory processing or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's there's a word and it's making me crazy. I have to like verbally, I need to say it, externally process it, maybe is the right word. I can't remember. There's a word for it and I can't think of it, but
Yeah.
I try and take the transcript and, take out the pieces that it made sense to me. But it really is just the fact of talking to myself, I think, that helps me sort through ideas. And, if I'm having trouble, especially towards the end of the drafting process or the revision, if I'm having trouble with one section, and, I've had some trouble before in other sections too, but if I just start talking to myself about this problem, almost every time a solution will come up that solves a few different problems in the book for me. And those are really great moments because then I get all excited and I'm driving. I'm going, what if? So I have to drive by myself for this so that everyone, in the car doesn't think I'm crazy. And, the fun part is to me talking to people in traffic. It's fun to find those pieces when I'm going.
Yeah, or you like go off script.
Yeah. So very little of that actually. I'm not like narrating to myself actual lines that will go in the book. It's more problem solving, I guess, for plot points. And sometimes it'll be a snippet of dialogue or something, and I'll try and keep that if I like it enough. But most of the time, it's just me trying to figure stuff out.
Yeah. Yeah. So then are there scenes that like are your favorite to types to write or like that come really easily to you, whether it be like dialogue or anything like that where you really enjoy those scenes?
I do think dialogue is something I enjoy. I'm kind of a plotter and a plantser. And I find plotting out a book, there are a lot of snippets of dialogue that pop up kind of first, before I could really sketch out everything that's happening. I do find that I will get snippets of dialogue as I'm plotting, and that will kind of start becoming the framework for figuring out what's happening in those scenes. So yeah, I think it's the
Mhm.
dialogue writing that.
I like that. So who has been the hardest main character for you to write?
That's a very good question. I think it might be Gemma, who is the main character of Until the Stars Fall. That book was very hard. That was the third book that I wrote, the first one that was published, but here it is. But it really took me, I knew I wanted to write a book about witches in space. Again, I saw that on an agent's wish. All it said was witches in space. And I thought, you know what? I love witches and I love space. I think I need to try this. But it took me a really long time to figure out who she was, and what she was doing in the story. She started off as kind of a totally different person than she ended up as. And I'm trying to think of the name of the book. I haven't had a lot of time to read a lot of craft books lately, but I have, gone through quite a few in the past. And there was one that talked about kind of interviewing the character or writing a scene that is like a long time before the book starts, but just trying to figure out who they are and what's going on. And that was finally what cemented it for me, was to try and see what was her life like what was the very, very first thing maybe that happened towards the book. And I just imagined her sitting in a coffee shop, and it was a totally different setup, honestly, than ended up being in the book, but it helped me kind of figure out who she was. She was an anxious person and a witch, and she didn't really want her magic, and she thought it was dangerous and was going to try and get rid of it. And that made it a lot easier to figure out who she was. I would say of my 3 books, she was the hardest to figure out.
Okay. And then on the flip side, who was the easiest or just came most natural to you?
I think I have to say it was Nazreen from The Night of the Trove because, like I said, she and her dragon guardian, Addie, just popped into my head one day. And Addie is very, very regal and very, of questionable background. She's got secrets. And Nazreen's just so done with her. She's so done with her not giving her information and not telling her things until people show up at the Trove and tell her something. And she's like, what do you mean? You never told me that. She's been with Addie for a long time. Around when she was 13 or 14, Addie rescued her actually from a very bad situation. And in the story, she's in her late 20s. And so she's been in here for a very long time. And Addie's just not told her very much. And so she's just so done with her.
Yeah.
And her job is kind of Trove archivist. So she's organizing Addie's gold and treasures, but also she's the one who fights off the people coming to try and rescue her. So yeah, I would say that
I
she
love
kind
that.
of popped into my head.
Okay. I love that. So is there a side character that's kind of, you didn't think they'd have as a big of a role and they kind of went way over here and you're like, oh, do I need to give you your own book? Or like, you're really annoying. Go sit down. I'm trying to write.
Yes, it's actually happened a few times. It happened with the dragon Addie. This story was about Nazreen. It was not about Addie the dragon, but she popped in and she was just so commanding, almost like, I promise I'm not really hearing her voice in my head, but she just was so demanding. Like, you must put me in here a lot. You must talk about me. And you
Okay.
hear a lot. I hope you know I'm going to be in the subsequent books also. And I actually am thinking about writing a little novella of her as one of the main characters because there's a portion of time in book 2 where she's off doing something important to the story. And I had the thought maybe I might write a little something about her. She also seems to be a reader favorite. People seem to really like her. And then the other character he actually appears in It's in Until the Stars Fall. He appears at the end of the book and in the beginning, actually, the beginning and the end, but he's Gemma's boss. And I won't give away anything about him, but while I've been drafting book 2 in that series, he is still not the lead main character, but he won't stop talking to me. It's been a while since I've actually touched that draft. I got kind of sidetracked and just kind of got stuck on it, but his name is Evander and he just won't stop talking. And I'm like, look, book 3 is your book. I need you to kind of chill for a minute. This is about your brother. And he's like, nope, I'm going to take.
I love when characters, you're like, just take a number at like the DMV and go sit down and like wait your turn. And they're like, no, you need to talk about me now.
Yeah. Strange thing. Like you wouldn't think that people that you're making up are going to do this to you, but they do. I don't know if it's just like I'm just interested in them or I think they're really cool, but they do almost take on a life of themselves. It's so funny.
Yeah. They live like rent free in your brain and you're like, and trying to fall asleep and they're talking and you're like, shh, be quiet.
Yeah.
So I definitely feel that. So do you have a daily writing goal? Like, what's your writing process? Do you have like a routine that you do? Best time of day, snacks, music, no music? What does that look like for you?
So it's really hard for me to say because I feel like I used to have a routine when I first started, being dedicated. I'm going to finish books. Like I said, I have a full-time job. And when I finally decided I'm actually going to start finishing books, I would write on my lunch hour. And most of the time I would go to, a restaurant or someplace. And so the backdrop, I love that kind of percussive, kitchen-y, conversation-y hum sort of backdrop. And so that became what I needed to write by. And it was kind of a trigger whenever I would sit down. It was like, okay, now it's book time. But then COVID hit and I began working from home and I've been working from home ever since. And that became even more difficult because I originally was working at my kitchen table, the one I built, but I was working at my table. And, for that first year, especially, my kids were home doing virtual, school. And the little one, he was third grade, fourth grade, like he was very nearby me doing his stuff. I could hear his teacher all day. So it became really hard for me to figure out when do I write? How do I write? How do I do this, new routine? And now, 6 years past the COVID shutdown, I still don't know. I'd love to say that I have a word count goal and that I'm just very kind of loosey-goosey / disorganized about writing goals and when I'm going to write. I do better during the day. That's when I have more brain power and more energy. But unfortunately, that's for the full-time job that pays the bills. It takes, my whole day time. So the weekends, if I can, try and focus in, but again, it's hard now. My desk is in the middle of my living room. I don't have an office. And so the weekend is hard because there's my husband's home, my kids are home, there's people in and out of the house. And it's really hard to focus. So all that to say, no, I'm really chaotic and it's a little bit frustrating. Right now. I'm trying to finish up this most recent revision for The Prince of the Outsiders that's coming out in August. And I'm finding it really hard to balance actual writing time with all the other indie author tasks of, marketing and promos and just all of the things. So all that to say, no, I'm disorganized, chaotic mess when it comes to all of that. And I don't know how I'm making any progress at all, but I hope it gets better.
I feel like that's a lot of authors though, especially ones that are moms and working full time and doing it indie because you're doing everything. You don't have a marketing department. You don't have an editing department. You don't have like people writing the social media posts. Like you are doing it all and writing the book. So I feel like it's expected to be chaotic, especially when you add in family and kids and all of that into the mix. Like it's going to be chaos, but I feel like that's the best, most rewarding at the end when you get it done because you did it amongst all of that.
That's true. That is true. I hope I could get,
Yeah. Yeah. You'll get there. You'll get a routine and a rhythm once everything calms down where it's supposed to be. It'll happen when it's supposed to, but maybe that is the method to your the madness to your method, like that setup is what brings your story forward. And so it needs to be that way. Yeah. So when you're writing a story, especially when it's in like the romance era, or more romance genre, so to speak, does the romance come first or does like the plot and like the conflicts come to you first?
I think it depends on the subgenre of romance for me because, for the rom-com that I wrote, I have one of those here. I'm in love with the covers. I love my covers. But for the rom-com,
I love that cover.
thank you. Rue is Free is her name on Instagram, and she's just so phenomenally talented. She just knocked it out of the park. But I think the relationship was a little bit foremost because it's set in my hometown of Metairie, which I, know very well, and it's the real world. I don't have to build a bunch of kingdoms and legends and cultures and things like that. So I think for, rom-com contemporary romance, it's easier for me to focus more on the love plot. It is the main plot. I think when it's romantasy, and for me, that means the romance and the fantasy have kind of equal weight in the plot. I think that it just depends, I think, on the characters and how they come up to me and decide to start talking to me and engaging with me. For sure, in the Knights of Melora series, because it's centered around finding these 4 caskets, that I'm one of the biggest things I'm struggling with is continuing the overarching fantasy storyline. So I think this time I feel like I focused a lot more on that part than on the romance part, especially, the first draft. I sent it to my beta readers and I'm like, look, the romance is not romancing. It's not. There's not things happening in the right place or the right pace. It just was definitely off for me. And I've improved it over, several different drafts. But yeah, I think it depends on the book. When I first started finishing books, I thought, oh, I can just do this like a process and I can figure out what my process is. And once I know that, I can write every book the same way. And then I really realized very quickly that no, it was going to be a struggle. I would figure out for every different book that I write has its own kind of process. I mean, I've kind of set in a more consistent pattern now. I will plot it out first and then I'll draft and everything. Yeah, they just seem to each present their unique challenges every time. I feel like I'm kind of starting over. It's a good thing that I have, 3 that I can look at and say, hey, look, you finished 3 books, because every time you start a new one, it's like, am I sure I can really write a book? But I have, and so I will continue to do it.
Yeah. So when you're writing, how do you go about building the tension and, the intrigue and that sort of thing between the chapters so that it has that flow with the pacing and the world building? Is that hard?
It's really hard, and it's definitely not something that I can do in a first draft. There's a lot of hate for first drafts out there in the world, and I don't feel that way at all. I love first drafts, and I don't like any first draft slander. It really is. I think it's Terry Pratchett says it's just telling yourself the story is what a first draft is, and it really is for me. No matter how well I've plotted out, and some of my plot documents can get like 80 pages long, I still get in the middle of a chapter and I'm like, yeah, I don't know what's happening. But the first draft is never, even sometimes like the second draft and revisions after that, those are never places for me unless it just happens that way, which, it's just come to me that way. Early drafts are not the place for me to figure out chapter to chapter what happens. It's just not how my brain works. It's definitely over time. It's kind of like sketching, and I'm not a good artist, but I might draw my little stick figure sketch, first, and then I'll add details with every revision. Um, and it has to happen that way for me. It's a lot more layered. I really enjoy books that are very layered and have a lot of different threads kind of going on that come together. And I don't feel like I can layer that in the first time. It all just has to get down on page first. And then, like I said before, it needs to sit on the back burner somewhere in my head. And like talk amongst itself, until I come back around to it.
Yeah.
And I how to tie it together. Yeah, and pacing is something I kind of struggle with too. I try to have you start off, something happens, and then they have to react to it. So I try to keep that kind of momentum going as I write, but it doesn't always come easily. And then sometimes you have to move something around. And now I've just gone and screwed up, my dual POV. How do I fix it? So yeah, it just takes time, I feel like. And I think that's where I want to give up. And I think that's where a lot of people maybe who are writing a book for the first time kind of want to give up is, what I'm making does not look like a published book at this point. It is just not. The pace isn't pacing. The romance isn't romancing. The plot's not plotting, but you can't stop there. You have to go back and refine it and refine it and refine it. At least I do.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's why they call it like the messy first draft, because then it's never going to look that way. Usually, once you get through everything, it's not the same book that you started with. because you've changed so much. But I found it fascinating what you were talking about that you saw. Do you follow like publishers and they made like a wish list? Like I've never heard that before. And that's so fascinating to me that you saw someone say, oh, I'm looking for this. And then you were like, oh, I'm going to write that.
Yeah. So when I first started writing, my intention was to publish traditionally. And so I learned all about querying agents. And at the time, Twitter was the book space of Twitter was very active, and agents and editors were constantly posting out. There would be a hashtag MSW. Manuscript wish list. And there's a whole website. There's actually still a website called that Manuscript wish list where all the agents and editors list out the types of books that they are interested in and they're looking for. And when you're querying agents, and I guess when agents are querying editors, that's a very useful thing to know who to send what to. You know, I remember seeing this one agent that said he hates dragons. And so I know, well, I can't send him Night of the Trove. You know, he's definitely not going to like that book.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, I used to follow a ton of agents and used to pay attention to what they were looking for, because if I happened to have a book that fit their manuscript wish list, I would go, oh, hey, I saw that you're looking for a book like this when I query them. But as soon as my first book that came out, Until the Stars Fall, I published it with a small press and asked for my rights back about 10 days before the book came out. I don't want to say things too much about the press. It was not a good experience for me leading up to that. For example, they posted about my book one time on social media the day after it came out. So there were so many issues with that. Very, very lucky to be able to get my rights back. But once I did that, I was actually still in the middle of querying other books when that happened, but I couldn't do anything else with Until the Stars Fall because it had already been published. So I couldn't query it anymore. I had to turn around and self-publish it. And as soon as I did that, I started looking at the other books that I had written, which is how you end up starting 3 different series as your first 3 books. But I started thinking, you know, I have The Night of the Trove sitting here and I have Follow Your Bliss sitting here. Why don't I just publish them myself? You know, for me, extremely painful querying agents. I did it for about 5 years. At least. It was extremely painful. It was so much up and down of getting requests and then getting crushed again. After a while, it feels like gatekeeping. I don't think that they're seeing it that way. And I don't think that it's meant that way necessarily, but it's so subjective. I mean, any reader has got the things that they like to read. And I think for agents, it's not just that they have to love the book, but they also have to feel like they can market it and they can only handle, I'm sure, so many, you know, authors at a time. So all that to say, I guess that I just started doing the self-publishing, and that was it for me. And I really have enjoyed it ever since then. You know, I love being in charge of all of my cover design and all of my, you know, revisions and just all of the things that I can be in charge of as an indie author. Because I do know some traditionally published authors, you know, who've had, you know, covers they didn't love and book title changes they didn't love and stuff like that.
I never heard that. That's a new to me thing. That's really cool that you got that as like you're kind of challenging yourself as an inspiration to write something based on a need.
Yeah. And what's funny about it to me was that the two, and they were very short. Like I said, one literally said, which is in space. And then I went, ooh, that sounds fun. And I wrote a whole book based off of that idea. That agent never opened up to queries the entire time I was querying. So I never if she would even like it. I don't even know if she was looking for a romance. She was probably looking for something totally different than what I wrote, you know? And then the editor who tweeted about, you know, a bookish prince with a lady knight, she was an editor, so I never could have pitched directly to her. Agents do that. So yeah, I have no idea if either of those people had anything in mind like what I wrote. And the goal wasn't really to try and necessarily write to market, right? You know, it's, for one thing, it's just one person's wish list and opinion. And the other thing is, you know, I feel like a lot of the time writing to what's hot is just not going to do you any good, because by the time you're finished writing it, everything moves on to something else. So, but yeah, I'm not on
to something else. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not on
Switches and
anymore, where I got off a long time ago, and I don't follow any agents or editors for that purpose anymore. They come across my feed.
yeah. Yeah. All right. So when you're writing, do you prefer the slow burn or the instant chemistry within your romance?
Kind of like a mixture of both, kind of. I do tend to write slow burns, but I also tend to write a lot of, I don't know why I keep doing this, but Forbidden Love seems to be one that is one of my favorites too. And so I think that for me, you know, they may like each other, be attracted to each other, but there's something keeping them apart. And that tension for me is what makes the story almost possible. You know, otherwise it's just not to me that interesting if they just insta love, you know, instant attraction, sure. Maybe insta love, but with all these complications. And so they're like, yeah, we can't. But yeah, I think that's what I tend to write more is the slow burn. The Night of the Trove is he is a monk. So he's trying to, fight his temptation.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. That sounds good. I want to read that one. So this is a fun one. This is for your MMCs. Out of your MMCs, who would you date? Who would you marry? And who would you kick to the curb?
That's really hard. So for me, my tagline for my romance books is radiant romance, respectfully, and that's hot, because I really like writing the green flag MMCs. Give me the cinnamon rolls and the golden retrievers, the feminist men that I want to see in the world are who I write. So I kind of love all three of them. Okay, so I'm sorry. My choices are kick to the curb, date, and
Marry.
marry. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
Really, I don't know. Can I have all three?
Yeah. White shoes.
It's why choose? Well, because, okay, so Jason in Follow Your Bliss is a golden retriever, and he's very, it's set in the modern world. So he's a feminist, and he's very attentive to helping her. He's very determined to help her with her business and help her get what she wants in life. And, but then Cass in The Night of the Trove is such a sweetheart. He is a very just kind, greenest flag, emotional person. And then back in Until the Stars Fall he's a scientist who's also a witch. And so he's brilliant. He also happens, if he looks a little bit like Jason Momoa, that is not an accident. So I don't know. If I could have all three, I don't think I could pick.
Yeah.
It's
all right. We'll do it.
hard.
I like that. I like that. So then for your female characters, who would be your best friend? Who would be your roommate? And who would you take on a road trip?
Let's see. I think best friend, roommate, and road trip. I think best friend Rose. I think Rose is my best friend. I relate to her a lot. Obviously, she's my character. She and I think a lot the same, in a lot of ways. I gave her my anxiety, poor baby. I could bond over that. We would each understand. And I also gave her my mom. My mom was a seamstress. She actually made porcelain dolls and sewed all their clothes. That was how she made money when we were kids. And Rose is a wedding dress designer and sewer. So I think we would, bond over craft time and stuff like that too. So I guess she'd be my best friend. I think roommate, probably Nazreen from The Night of the Trove, because like me, she very much likes her solitude. So I know that we would not, be irritating each other. It would just be, we'll do this thing this time, but we have our own space, so we're good. And then road trip, I guess Gemma for that, because she's a bit like Nazreen. She's also introverted, and she can be a little cat. What is it again? Sunshine Gold, whatever it is, between the two of them.
Yeah.
But in the book, they're on a road trip.
Grumpy Sunshine.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the book itself, they're actually on a road trip, just in a vintage space hotel held together with spells and duct tape. And she's very smart and very cool. So if anything happens or goes wrong on the trip, I know that she's smart enough to help us handle it.
Love that. I love that. Okay, I just have to rewind for a second. So I am a fashion design major, so I love that. But my grandma used to make porcelain dolls and sew all their clothes. And she had this room. So anytime I went and stayed at her house, there were like dolls from the floor to the ceiling, and their little eyes were like watching me sleep. But I just love that.
We have the same background because I have a lot of friends who were terrified of dolls, but I grew up with my mom making them. I would see her, my grandpa would also help pouring, the slip for the molds to get the heads out. My mom was always cleaning the greenware and painting the heads and firing them. So, there were porcelain, doll body parts just all through my childhood. So they don't really bother me. But what's funny about that, the room, my bedroom, or my teenage, we moved when I was a teen, my bedroom is my mom's doll room, and it is floor to ceiling, the entire closet, everything porcelain dolls. So it's so funny to hear you say that, because that's what
Yep. I love that. We have the similar background. So what has been the biggest or most profound surprise you've learned on your writing journey?
I think initially the biggest surprise is that, and this is going to sound like so silly, but I knew I wanted to be a writer like sixth grade, probably 10 or 11 years old. I read Jane Eyre and I fell in love I just love words. I just think they're beautiful, and I knew I wanted to be a writer. I got an English degree, and then I spent the next 20 years basically telling myself I can't really do that. It was just this kind of fun thing I did, like a guilty pleasure, coming up with characters and worlds and kind of starting a book, but never getting past 20 or 30,000 words. And I even worked at Barnes & Noble for several years, and I would see books on the shelf and think, oh gosh, that'll never be me. And very, very Eeyore, I guess, about it. And so I think one of the biggest surprises, actually, I think what started the like awakening kind of was, well, some therapy that helped. But also my husband found this writers conference and I can't remember the name of it, but it was in New Orleans and I went to it. And what really struck me was for the first time ever, I was in a room with over 100 other people who thought they could write books too. Who for them, it wasn't, when you tell a friend or a relative, I want to write books, they're like, that's adorable, go you, or I have a cousin or an uncle or a friend or whatever. And it's so hard and good luck. They're very discouraging. A lot of people are, but being in a room with all of these other people who were just as delusional as I was, because I was finally starting to come around to the idea that I could actually do this. I think that has been the biggest surprise and the biggest ongoing surprise because, I like I said, I spent so long talking myself out of doing the one thing I always wanted to do. It's so easy to fall back into that mindset. It's so easy to, even after having 3 books out, to think, oh, nobody knows who I am, and that's very true. Believe me, to a large part, I'm a very small author still. But then I'll run into somebody who or they DM me on Instagram or something and they're like, oh, I found your book at this indie bookstore and I read it and I loved it and we're using it for our book club. And it's kind of shocking to me every time, that, hey, I did this thing and people are actually reading it and they seem to like it for the most part. Like, that's just so strange. Like, I thought this wasn't going to happen, like I said, there's 20 years of just like, yeah, I can't do that. So yeah, it
Yeah.
continues to surprise me, I guess, just that I'm able to do it and that some people are reading it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like I talked to another author, I think early last year, and she said that she felt like we were in a new Renaissance era because there's so many more people, writing and self-publishing and artists doing the cover art or the, interior pages. And it's kind of like a revival of the where the great paintings all came from and the great works. And I totally agree with that. I feel like anyone can write a book. You just have to start, like, and you don't even have to share it. Like, you can write the book and get your story out, and then if you want to share it, great. If you don't, you don't. But like, there's no one stopping you but you. And so I'm glad that you got that aha moment.
Yeah, it was a hard one. I mean, I was the kind of person in college, I didn't even take a fiction writing class in college because I thought I wasn't going to be good enough to do it, which is so silly. You go there to learn, and at the time I was just like, oh, I'm not going to be good enough to do that. So that's definitely, who I kind of am as a person, so it was really hard one. But no, I like that thought of the kind of renaissance because, I'm 100% human artist all the way. No generative AI is ever going to touch any part of my books. And I
Yeah.
follow artists and I want to commission all of them because I just love what they can create. And I just think that human creation is just never going to be topped by anything. It's just
Yeah.
so beautiful. So I like that idea of a renaissance. And
Yeah. I know. Yeah. I know a lot of people are like, but honestly, like, human artists are going to overrun anything AI ever. Like, there's not really a need to worry because it's never going to be a thing because you can severely, starkly see the differences between the two. Like, it is there. So I know everyone's like worried or like scared by that, but I don't really think it's going to be where it replaces it because that's like the person that doesn't have a heart or a soul. So it's not going to transcend their work because it's not that way. And an artist that puts their time and work and energy into it is way different. So,
yeah, I think, you also have that drive inside you to create art, to write or to paint or to whatever it is, just looking at my 14-year-old, he's the artist of, my family and he is vehemently also against generative AI, but he will sit there all day and he just pours his heart. He's so good at it. I just think that people are people and they're going to continue to feel that way about the need to create. So, and yes, it's obviously just so much
yeah.
better soul to it. So that's how I feel too.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So if you could go in a time machine and go back in time and talk to your younger running self, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself, I'll just do it. Just, stop that, stop with the you can't do it. Just stop because, sometimes I look back and when I could have started writing, I don't want to should on myself, as they say, you shouldn't should on yourself, but I could have started writing right out of college. I I didn't need to, I needed to get a job at some point. You got to pay the bills. I got to keep my job forever probably to pay the bills. But I kept thinking that writing is going to be what I do when I finally figure out what my day job is. And so I really focused all of my attention on, okay, what kind of day job can I have? What am I interested in? What am I good at? So I would tell myself, hey, look, yeah, get the day job, but don't put your bulk of your effort and brain, power into figuring out what your career should be, because writing is what your career should be. I think it's so easy to say because, don't quit your day job. Yeah, no, for sure. In this economy, everybody is struggling. I think I would just tell myself, look, whether or not you think you can, just do it. Just start writing and finish books and try. If you don't try, you're not going to do it. You have to try to get there. You have to write the book before you can publish it. So, yeah, I would try and break that down. A really hard thing for me to learn.
Yeah. And then standing there with your younger self, what do you think they would say about you or to you as they're, seeing you now?
I think that to what I say to them, they wouldn't believe me. I'm very good at putting hurdles in front of myself. I think I put that in Until the Stars Fall. Give me a clear field and I will put hurdles in my own way. I will make them up. But I think the first thing would be, I don't believe you. Because I'm also stubborn sometimes. I think they would just be like surprised and happy, I guess, and more surprised than anything. Like, I can't believe you actually did this, and I can't believe we actually could do this because I thought we couldn't. I think that would be the bulk of it. It would just be like disbelief.
Oh, it's good. You wrote several books. It's really cool. That's like you wrote a book. Like you should celebrate that. That's really, really cool. So I thought we could do a couple, two little games, and then I have like a couple wrap up questions. But these are just some fun things to kind of get to know your characters a little better. So this is called character confessions. So you're going to answer as though you are the character. So your main character walks into a bar. What do they order? Or a coffee shop if they don't drink? Either one.
Okay. I'm going to pick a character just like from one of my books, I guess. Just pick somebody.
Yeah.
Okay. I can do from The Prince of the Outsiders because I am working in that book right now, I guess. So let's see. Prince Fourth would walk into a bar and he would probably order a beer. That's what he's going to get. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then what would be his kind of like theme song or favorite song that is like his jam?
I'm thinking On the Road Again. Just have to be on the road because he's very much a restless kind of person. He's always wanted to go out and do things and travel and he just has been very restless through his life. So I think On the Road Again would suit him pretty well.
Okay. And without giving us spoilers, if you can, if we can't, we can scrap this question because sometimes I know it's hard. What's like the biggest like lie he tells himself?
I think in the course of the story, I think the lie he tells himself the most is that he's broken and irredeemable. These nightmares are very, very dark and brutal, and he starts to really despair. And so I think that's a lie he tells himself a lot.
Okay. And then what would be something he would absolutely refuse to do? If there was like, a reality show and they like, you have to do this, this is your challenge. He'd be like, nope, I'm out. Like, what would that be?
Let's see. Let me think a second. What would he not want to do? So he's a very respectful guy. I can't remember that actress's name, but I don't know if you remember at the Oscars one year, an actress stumbled and Chris Evans runs forward with his arm and everybody just praised him for doing that because he didn't put his hand out. He just put his arm in case she wanted to help, didn't say that she needed it. I think if he had to insult a woman, he'd be like, yeah, I'm out. I'm not doing that. He's very a huge green flag. Like he very much is a very respectful person.
I like that. All right. So this is a would you rather, and this is your answers. So would you rather a physical book, an audiobook, or an ebook?
I like the physical book. I just like to touch them, maybe smell them.
Okay. Yes. I love when you get a new book and it goes, I love that sound of a new book. It's the best. So would you rather crack the spine of the paperback or ruin the dust jacket on a hardback?
I would rather ruin the dust jacket because I'm just not a very organized person and I don't like reading a hardcover with the dust jacket on it. Mm-hmm. So I have probably ruined many a dust jacket cover unintentionally. So I would say I would rather not. I don't like. So I think I would rather do it that way.
And then do you prefer annotated books or pristine pages?
I think for the first read, I would want it pristine. Like if it was a book I was, and then if I was going to read it again, I would like to annotate it then probably. I don't typically annotate the books I read. And then if I was reading somebody else's book, I think I would want to read it pristine first and then get the behind the scenes kind of look with the annotations.
Okay. And then do you prefer to search on Goodreads to find your next read or go into the bookshop?
I'd rather go in the bookshop. I like to see, well, in one sense, I would, because I'm very much drawn to beautiful covers. So not too difficult, but I'm at a third option, Instagram, just because bookshops are not going to have indie author books usually. And I tend to author books. Right now, I'm making my way through a lot of my friends' books because I know some really amazing writers, and I'm been kind of in a reading slump just because time, and time and energy are kind of at a premium right now. But so I like seeing the covers. Maybe I would go to Goodreads. I'm so indecisive. I'm sorry. Maybe Goodreads is the better place to go.
Oh, you're fine. I do a little of both.
Yeah.
I do both. I do a little here, a little there. I'm a little butterfly. I flitter everywhere. So that's how I am. So do you use a bookmark or dog ear the pages?
No dog earing and no nice bookmarks usually either. It's usually a Post-it note or a receipt or something like that because I'm not very organized again.
Okay.
So I have nice bookmarks. I just don't know where they are.
Right. Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm like, they're in a basket somewhere. This will work. So.
Or very likely that
that
I didn't finish. That's probably where they are, is a nonfiction book that I did not finish.
Yeah, I have some of those. They're like tucked in the back. They're like back there behind the pretty books. So would you rather have dinner with your favorite character or your favorite author?
That's really hard. I think I'd rather have a dinner with my favorite author. The first person I thought of is Robin McKinley. I'm a huge fan of Robin McKinley. I used to read The Hero and the Sword every single year. Or is it Hero and the Crown? My brain fog is not great. Robin McKinley has always been one of my favorites. Just her fantasy is just awesome. And her writing, oh my God, the words are beautiful. So I would and she has such a great sense of humor, like all the interviews that I've read with her online. So I would just love to hear, just to talk to her. I don't think I would even need to pepper her with questions. I would just love to hear what she had to say, I guess.
Yeah. That's awesome. So would you rather read the book first or watch the movie first?
That's really hard. I've done both. I guess I'd rather read the book first. Because I usually think books are better than the movie, but then that kind of ruins the movie. Mm-hmm. So, like, for example, How to Train Your Dragon, it's a young adult series. I've seen the movie.
Yeah.
I did see the movie first, I think, but this book series is phenomenal. It's so much better than the movie. And David Tennant, one of my favorite actors of all time, he narrates all of the audiobooks. So that's how I experienced that. And I adore him. He's one of the nicest people. I mean, not that I've met him, obviously, but so yeah, I think I would rather read the book first, but then I'll probably not enjoy the movie.
Okay. Okay. And then would you rather the first line or the last line?
The first line. I'm very interested first in how they bring you into a story. That's kind of always been a thing because they're hard to write. They're so hard to write. So seeing other people and how they do it and what pulls you into the story is really interesting to me.
Yeah. And then are you more romance scenes or action scenes?
I'm probably more romance scenes when I read. I do enjoy action scenes. Okay. Most of my favorite movies are both. The Mummy is my favorite movie of all time, with Brendan Fraser, of course.
Me too.
Really, I love this. Is the best movie coming out. I'm so excited. But then I also love Thor Ragnarok. I love and the humor. I would say the romance probably first, but I do love me some action too.
Yes, it is. I agree. So my last couple of questions are, what, in your opinion, makes a great story?
Let's see. So I'm a very happiness-seeking person when I go to read, which I think is one of the reasons why I love romance so much, because I know it's going to have a happy ending. I think for me, it's what I'm left with when I leave it. I tend to read happier books. Like I said, I prefer romances. I like how they end. I prefer to escape when I read because the real world is frankly very terrifying right now. But I think what makes a good book for me is that I've connected with it in some emotional way, but also I'm left with hope. I don't like watching things or reading things where I'm not left with hope, where everyone is ugly and like ugly people, just not nice and cutthroat. And I don't consume media like that. I just, the world is too much of that right now. So I think that hopefulness is really important. So I like to be left with that. And I need to laugh. And I don't know. I like cleverness too. So
yeah, those are good things. So Are there any events? We have your book coming out later on this year. Is there any other things where we can maybe meet you in person or different events you might be doing?
The next event that I'm confirmed for is not until I think it's October. There's the South Coast Book Festival in Lake Charles. But I'm usually always at the Louisiana Book Festival also, and some of the local Louisiana and Mississippi book festivals maybe later in the year.
That's really cool. So my last question for you is, what message do you want readers to take away from after finishing your books?
I want them to take away, I guess, hopefulness. I mean, I guess that's kind of brings it around to the previous question. One of the reasons that I tend to write a lot of green flag men in the romances that I write, and not tend to, I do. I don't think I could ever write dark romance or bullying or morally gray. It's just, like I said, I kind of want to write the relationships I want to see in the world. I've known too many friends and family who have had really bad, difficult relationships. That were very either abusive or, unhealthy or whatever. So I hope that they leave with the belief that partners should be supportive and respectful and kind to you, that you deserve that, because I see that happening in the opposite direction way too many times. So like I said, I just kind of write what I want to see in the world. And so I hope that that's what they take away, is that they deserve the best.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I am so excited to start the night with the Trove. I think it's going to be like a really good book. And I want to read the other ones because I love witches, like so much my favorite. Another series I really loved growing up was Charmed. So anytime there's witches, I'm all for it. So I'm excited to read these.
Yes. And Until the Stars Fall, I like to describe it as kind of like practical magic in space, because I love practical magic also.
Yeah, that's another good one. That is another good one too.
The Charmed Girl too.
Well, definitely. So thank you so much for joining me. I linked her information below so you're able to follow her. Make sure you like and subscribe, support our indie authors because they keep us well out of our reality and into the world of fantasies and keep our hopes up. So definitely support her. If you have friends that love any of the topics and genres that she writes in, be sure to share it. Sharing is caring. So definitely do that. And join me next time as we get another look behind the book. And happy reading. And thank you again, Holly, so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we'll see you next time.